if you don't look directly at Goldfinger, you might be able to maintain your vision. So, my brother was always the Bond lover of the two of us, and he's the one that has the movies, so I do not. So these had to quickly be printed off of his computer, and there was some issues, but they're here regardless.
Skyfall looks good.
Yeah, I would have just gone without, but it just makes me feel better to just, hurt your eyesight, so I'm sorry. You don't even need to watch anyway, you just minimize and do other shit, and my voice will just be in your head.
I always tell people we're talking heads here. We don't have visuals.
I think that's how most people do it.
Yeah.
So, the thing about this is, I had to choose between two of 4 now? And I basically decided that we should go for what's kind of considered the Bond masterpieces on each side, because Goldfinger is often considered one of the absolute very best, particularly from that era, and Skyfall is also not only considered one of the best from the newer era, but of the entire series as well.
Right.
So I just took what I feel is probably close enough to unanimous decision of what the two best ones are. And it kind of gives us the classic versus the new as well. So that's another why I chose these. My personal favorite is From Russia with Love, but Goldfinger is probably definitely the most beloved of the classic era. So that's what we're gonna do. My history with this series is that my brother and myself would play the GoldenEye video game for endless hours, to the point that it annoyed me, but he was just addicted, so that's just what we did all the time. And then eventually we went to Blockbuster and we rented the movie for GoldenEye, and I wasn't aware that there were 20 of these things. So this was back when The War Is Not Enough had just not quite come out. And then he started making it a mission to get all of them. And so he would get one, and then we'd watch it, and we did that with the whole series, up to and including the unofficial ones, like the Casino Royale with David Niven and Woody Allen, and Never Say Never Again, which was Sean Connery wanted to remake Thunderball because he had the rights. So that's just what happened. So I've been very, very familiar with these for a very large fraction of my life. So, and I've seen most of them multiple times. So, all of that considered, these were the two that were decided on. And we're going to start, I think, with Goldfinger. And the reason I believe that Goldfinger is basically considered the quintessential one of the classic era is the fact that pretty much everything you think of when you think of the Bond character and the reason he is beloved by almost everybody is in this movie. Because obviously there were other things going on in the other movies, and he did, certain things, but pretty much everything that's iconic about Bond is in this one movie, despite the fact that it's the third in the series and not the first or even the second. So, and once again, it just kind of starts with what appears to be something totally unrelated for an opening. And we have that it's very, I know Doug will come to mind for you, that iconic image of him showing up in scuba gear and coming out from the water and doing his whole mission and blowing up this drug laboratory. And then he unzips his wetsuit and a white tuxedo is underneath it.
Yeah, Smash Adams.
Yes.
Of course.
And then he goes to a party while the laboratory blows up in the background. And that's not even the ending of the opening. We have to have, and it's always a tradition, at least it was always a tradition when we're above this now. But when you killed the main villain, he had to throw a pun out. Every time. But in this one, he gets the pun out in the opening scene as opposed to the ending, when he sees another iconic shot in the movie when he sees, he has the girl that's in the bathtub, and he's hugging her, and he sees the reflection in her eye of the guy coming up behind him, and throws him into the bathtub, then throws an electric fan in there, and electrocutes him and kills him. And the opening scene ends with him walking out of the room just going, shocking. Very shocking.
God.
And then, of course, we have another... you throw the word iconic around a lot, and generally it's misused. But talking about scenes in Goldfinger, I think it's pretty well suited. So you have the opening scene now. The opening with the song and the visual images of the hands and stuff like that. And that's, just going through, this is another thing where not only does it have all that classic Bond stuff, but just kind of in movie history in general, it's got a lot of really iconic images, starting with, when he comes into the room after being knocked out and sees Jill dead on the bed, and because she's covered in gold paint, and which is actually what killed her. They call it skin suffocation. And then there's pretty much everything with the Aston Martin, particularly. This was the introduction of the ejector seat, which has been seen in countless movies that are kind of lower tier versions of Bond around. Then there is the just pretty much anything pertaining to Oddjob, with his lethal hat that can decapitate statues. I know it's weird. It kind of hits and kills people, normal people, but can decapitate an entire statue. I don't know how that works, but you can't be that graphic. This was back in the 60s, remember? If you went as far as pertaining to that and keeping it the way it was set up, this would be a pretty gruesome movie thanks to Oddjob, just single-handedly. Not to mention, after he knocks Bond out right before he's about to go in and kill Jill, we see his Oddjob turns and his shadow hits the wall. That's a really memorable image that's seen a lot in these, like if you see a Bond perspective or something, there's a lot of something that this whole thing could just be listing the iconic scenes in this movie. There's Bond tied to the table and the laser is coming up between his legs, and then Goldfinger says that line that everybody knows. It's the ultimate Bond villain line, the "I expect you to die" line. Which apparently was supposed to be a saw blade coming up, but they thought that was overused, so they decided to make it a laser. And I think I actually read somewhere this is like the first movie that depicts a laser or something. So that's... endless Austin Powers references can be made here. I kind of love the whole... His name is Oddjob, so in...
Random task. I love that.
This is the first movie he orders the martini shaken, not served, from the girl on the plane. And that actually did not happen in the series as often as you thought it did, because there's the one scene, and you only live twice, where Charles Gray gets it backwards. So, when he hands it to him. And then there's the whole, the bomb is counting down and then stops. When he finally sets it, it has 7 seconds left. And it reads like that, yeah. Now, going back, talking about Oddjob for a second, actually. Grofrov's character, Goldfinger, obviously, is really... He's definitely kind of what you think of when you think Bond villains, for sure. But Oddjob is the real villain of this movie. Like, when you look at the AFI's list of the best heroes and villains, Goldfinger is on that list for the villains. But I'm really surprised it's not Oddjob of the two of them. Because there's, like I said, there's the whole thing. He just has so many iconic things about him as it is. But there's also, for starters, there's the music that accompanies him. For a while, every time we see him, there's that music that's like a jarring bell sound. And it just really kind of sets the tone for the kind of fear that his character brings when and he's just like a small dude, too. But there's such a fear around him when he appears. And he's actually pretty much even treated as the main villain. Because you'll notice, once again, more so in a lot of the older movies, there was always a tradition where the big climax would happen, and then you would fight the villain would die, and then everything would seem like everything was happily ever after, and then a henchman you forgot about would come back, and the last scene of the movie is them fighting him off, and then the movie ends. That's the reverse here. The big climatic fight is with Oddjob, and it's Goldfinger that comes back at the very end. So, I always found that interesting. It's kind of the reverse approach to that. And then you can look at, this is kind of one where we get, we kind of start to see some flaws in Bond a little bit. Like in Dr. No and From Russia with Love, he's kind of, it's almost like he's invincible. But then we get to a point here where obviously Bond's job is to kill people, succeed in missions, and then bang whoever girl happens to be there. And then we never see her again. And in this movie, that actually, his horniness by itself single-handedly costs the lives of 2 people. Because he goes up, and Jill is actually working for Goldfinger and is helping him cheat in cards to win more money. And he finds her and decides he's going to seduce her. He could just say, like, I caught you. But he really did not even need to investigate this. He was only there, he was only assigned to watch Goldfinger. Not participate in anything, just watch him and to see what he does. Was his only assignment. And he even gets called out on this by M. The fact that he saw Jill and was like, well, yes, that has to be mine, got her killed. And then her sister Tilly comes into the middle of the movie for revenge for her murder, and she gets killed by Oddjob's hat. So both Jill and Tilly were killed because he couldn't keep his dick in his pants around Jill. Which, though, if you see Shirley, and I think it's her name, circa 1964, I'd probably sacrifice a couple of lives too. So okay, you can forgive him, I suppose. Even though he's our hero and he costs lives because of his dick, it's okay. And speaking of his dick, another thing about this movie, Honor Blackman's character, the Bond girl that shows up in the last about third, Goldfinger's pilot, whose name is Pussy Galore, which of course sparked an ongoing thing throughout the franchise of these wordplay names. So there was, to my understanding, it was actually a little bit dirtier where she says, my name is Pussy Galore, and he says, I must be dreaming. But the original line that they couldn't get by the censors was, she says, I am Pussy Galore, and he says, I know you are, but what's your name?
I love the 60s. Good God.
So, and of course she's the one that seems unobtainable until she's obtainable. It's the whole thing. But we all love it because it's just, if you're a traditional person and you're a Bond fan, that is why Goldfinger is the status that it's at. Because it's just it's basically every Bond cliche there ever was, but it was like the first one to show them, and it's, like I said, just all in this one place here. And obviously there's obviously on top of all the iconic stuff, there's also memorable scenes just kind of placed throughout, like the golf game where he kind of tricks him into betting. He bets the gold and then tricks him into thinking and then throws in a loophole rule. There's the scene I always liked where he's on the plane and the woman is, Pussy Galore's little henchman is like spying on him, and he knows which areas she's spying through and toys with her because he knows. Another thing you see in every movie like this now, the big presentation of Operation Grand Slam, where he already has a whole map on the wall of the whole thing, and he takes them through it. But that's not enough. That's not super villainy enough. The floor opens up, and a full-sized model comes out of the ground. And he takes us through it again. Because that's the ultimate supervillainy way to do it. So, yes, there's, obviously this was the introduction to the Aston Martin that eventually shows up again in Skyfall. So, yeah, it's really easy to see how this movie has its status. It's just pretty much everything anybody wants in a Bond movie all in one place. This was basically... It's kind of surprising in retrospect this wasn't the first one. And not alone that, but it was the third. In my opinion, following the best one of the whole series. But and it was also kind of... Dr. No and From Russia with Love have their action moments and stuff like that. The train fight with Robert Shaw was really fantastic. But they were still really low-key, especially Dr. No. So Goldfinger was also kind of that transition to just being kind of a low-key spy story while also going into grander action and stakes getting higher and stuff like that. Regardless of if you can get the stakes any higher, it's always world domination. All Goldfinger wants to do is smuggle gold. That's all he wants to do. He wants to melt it down, put it in his car, and just send it off and sell it illegally or whatever. It's that's all he wants to do. That's it. So yeah, Operation Grand Slam sounds much bigger, doesn't it? Than just I'm just gonna send some gold off illegally. Was that worth getting sucked out of a plane window for? I don't know, but so that's yes, that's also kind of a nice piece of foreshadowing when they're in the plane and Pussy pulls a gun on him and he says, if you shoot a hole in this window in its plane, we're just gonna be sucked out into oblivion and we'll all die. And that actually ends up being how Goldfinger dies at the end. So yeah, we all love Goldfinger and for good reason, and we all know why. So I suppose we can move on to Skyfall, which took a different approach. I think for starters, we hired Sam Mendes, who had directed Daniel Craig, and what I believe to be his best performance, which is Road to Perdition.
Yes.
And this number one, it was a big deal because it was the 50-year anniversary. It was from 1962 to 2012, and we don't do the traditional opening that we usually have. They actually do it at the end, which I guess is a really nice way of doing it, because obviously, much like You Only Live Twice, and a few others probably, if I remember correctly, this movie begins with the death of Bond, where she has Moneypenny take the shot, and he flies off the train, and then everybody else in the movie is supposed to believe that he is killed. And he disappears for a long time, and then once he comes back, he has to kind of readjust himself back into his Bond ways. Which I really like, because this one really shows kind of a vulnerability to him and the fact that he's not invincible. How, despite the fact that it's about him literally returning from the dead, it actually shows that he's not invincible. It's a weird concept when you think about it that way, but because yeah, he can't fire worth a shit now, and he's just, everything about him is just off, and he's not the Bond we know and love anymore, and he's got to pull himself back into that. I particularly like the moment where it shows when he's, I believe it's in Shanghai, when he's fighting the guy in that pit, and that creature is in there, and he kind of stops mid-fight to just point to the creature. And it's like, it's not very often we see fear on his face, but this thing that just kind of crawls out is great. It's great to see him react that way in mid-fight when we're used to seeing, like, stone face, whatever. And yes, and obviously right before then, of course, it's the ultimate, it's another one of the really great Bond openings where it's this massive scene that just goes from a foot chase to a motorcycle chase to a motorcycle chase on top of roofs, onto a train, onto whatever the fuck he was doing. There's the obviously great Bond-like moment where the back half of the train rips off and he jumps down and lands on his feet and then just like adjusts his sleeve before he goes back into fighting. And like I said, this is what kind of brings us all back. This is what brings us into the stuff we know, like the Walther PPK comes back, the Aston Martin comes back. We're introduced to Q for the first time in the new series. Stuff a lot of which I talked about when I did the Spectre review, so... Now, before I go... And the cinematography, obviously. This movie got a lot of positive attention because just the way it's shot, with Roger Deakins doing it, obviously. Obviously, the scenes in Shanghai get a lot of praise when he's fighting Noomi Rapace's husband. And Patrice was his character's name. With like the giant jellyfish going by, and then all the other Shanghai footage just in general. And then there's a lot of stuff in the ending, like with the whole place burning in the background behind Bardem, and then the shot I really love when Bond is pulled underwater. And we have this really, really vast underwater shot, and at the top of it, you can still see the fire reflecting off the top of the water. That's a really awesome shot. And yes, it's definitely there's a lot of action in it, and all of the action has a real purpose. This is, I think, one of the main reasons this movie gets so much praise is pretty much everything in the movie that happens is not gratuitous, despite being everything we love in movies like this. Like, every action scene has a reason behind it, and every, just all the, cool scenes kind of have their actual purpose for being here, apart from just being cool scenes for the sake of it. They all have kind of a tie-in. Now, do I talk about Bardem first, or do I talk about some of the stuff I don't like? Let's go ahead and go into Bardem real quick. Who was almost nominated for an Oscar for this. He came really close. BAFTA and SAG is like what you really need to get in there, and he had those, and he came really close. But I think what screwed him over was Alan Arkin being the token nomination. That's kind of... but regardless, there's a lot of build up to him. It is literally halfway, and I think it's almost exactly halfway into the movie when we finally see him. And he's not even really... He's kind of built up with, like the stuff on M's computer and stuff like that, but we don't really know it's from a specific person. And then we meet our Bond girl of the movie, I guess. She's in it for like 5 minutes. But we meet him through her, and we get a sense of him before we even know who he is through her by the fear that she has inside her when discussing him. And that's kind of when we start our build-up, and then we go out, and it's the big thing. And it's probably one of the best Bond villain entrances we've ever had. Where it's probably the best. I don't know, they don't typically have ceremonious entrances, really. This is kind of a unique thing, I guess. Where, obviously it's Bond seated here, and he comes up an elevator from all the way across the room, and it's just one long shot of him getting closer and closer while he's monologuing. Until he's right up on us, and that's kind of his reveal. That's a really cool scene. And the great thing that Bardem does here is he's so villainy, but in the same way, it doesn't really take away from the dark tone of the movie, because he's extremely flamboyant, but at the same time, he kind of still manages to avoid campiness. And of course, there's the whole suggestive thing about when he's being very suggestive towards Bond, and then goes as far as to sit down in front of him and caress his thighs while he's seated, and is talking about... He's basically not being subtle in any way, and then Bond says something like, "What makes you think this is my first time?" And it's this whole... probably the first time in history that James Bond and a male villain have had sexual tension. This is what 2012 brings. So, and it's all great. And then we have that great scene where we have the moment when he takes the girl out there and he puts the shot glass on her head. Because up to this point, we know he's the really flamboyant, over-the-top villain, and he's this expert hacker, but we're not quite positive how lethal he is. We know he used to be an agent, but we don't really get a glimpse of just how deadly he is. And then we have this moment when he does that, and I love when they come outside, there's music playing, and I love the way Bond says at the end when he comes in the helicopter, blaring speakers, and it's Silva always has to make a grand entrance. So there's music playing when they're outside, and then he hands him a gun and asks him to shoot the shot glass off her head. And instead of like having a building score or whatever, or the music having any kind of effect on this scene, the music just stops entirely. And the scene goes silent while this scene plays out. Just as he's about to... Because we know he's a shit shot right now. And he has to do this. And then just as he misses her, and the tension just kind of comes to a stop for a second, Silva just shoots and kills her without even looking. And says, "I win." And then that's when we kind of get a glimpse of, okay, this guy's pretty dangerous now. Yeah, he can hack into our shit, but he will also kill us with no remorse. It's time we do something about this. And so and then we have the scene that's really good after he's been captured, when he's in the glass cell and he's confronting M about their past together. And he talks about the cyanide capsule that he had to take and how it basically ate away his insides. And he takes out, like, not only are his top teeth false, but there's also something supporting his cheek in there. And when he takes it out, he actually takes this monstrous look. And it just kind of shows, I mean, it's cheesy and obvious, but of course you can say it kind of shows just how monstrous he is. Because he's so clean cut, and he's got the blonde hair, and he's got the bright suits and everything, and he has this very just clean look about him. And then when we see what he really looks like without support, he's got the ugly teeth and the drooping face, and looks literally as monstrous as he is on the inside. So that's a good way to do that. Some things I don't care for. Really, a lot of the first half hour after the opening scene, because I mean, it does a good job at setting stuff up, and I know it seems kind of impatient to say that pretty much everything prior to Silva is something I'm not crazy about, because you spend a lot of time just waiting for him to appear. But on top of that, this movie has a lot of really clunky exposition. There's a lot of really cliche dialogue, and a lot of the humor doesn't work. For a while, it really starts to pick up in that second half on all of this. Not just the fact that Bardem comes in and makes it infinitely more exciting, but like the humor seems to get sharper and funnier, and the dialogue starts to get better. There's not as much... The exposition's a little better, especially, like I said, the stuff that's talked about when he's in the cell and stuff like that. There's one scene I don't like, and maybe this is just... I don't know, maybe it's just me, but, there wasn't really, the scene with, Q's introduction, when it's kind of a throwaway bit for laughter, and you go, yeah, we're in the gritty dark age now, or whatever, but it's when he's talking about all of the gadgets with Q, and then Q says, he asks if there's anything else, and then Q says, why were you expecting an exploding pen? Which is something, it's in Goldeneye, I can't remember if it's in any others, but you know it's a jab at, that was campy stuff, this is the real dark gritty stuff. It just kind of felt condescending toward the rest of the series, when that's really not that necessary. Especially since, GoldenEye is one of the better movies. If you're gonna take jabs at a Bond movie to talk about what's campy and what isn't, there are much easier targets than GoldenEye, I promise you. I just thought that was kind of cheap, and like I said, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The way the way it kind of hints at how they feel about the rest of the series. But maybe that's just me. And then the whole Bond gets a lot of backstory starting here, and kind of one of the more appealing things about him before was the fact that we know all these traits about him. We know all the stuff he does, like what he drinks and who he's gonna bang and how he's gonna save the day. We know a lot. We feel like we know a lot of stuff about him, so much so that we never think about the fact that we don't know anything about him personally. Once On Her Majesty's Secret Service happened, and Blofeld killed his wife. Then we got some backstory that we knew that kind of, stuck with the character the rest of the way. But we still didn't really know what happened prior to what we had seen. And it made him kind of also mysterious and intriguing. And I think that's one of the hugely appealing things about the character. And he gets a lot of backstory in this and in Spectre. They're just kind of really throwing Bond's backstory at us. And it pissed a lot of people off, the tombstones. Because a lot of people loved the idea that James Bond was just a code name, and all the different actors we see are just different agents with the code name James Bond. But we see on the tombstone that his legit last name is Bond, so that kind of killed that theory for everybody, and that's just not something I'm too keen on. And the idea that the whole plot of Silva wanting to get captured, being taken into prison, sitting in a glass case and monologuing, and then breaking out. There was The Dark Knight, there was Iron Man 2, and there was The Avengers that did that all before this. And then Star Trek Into Darkness did it shortly after this did. I do the movie still sells it in a cool way. Like, I'm not necessarily complaining about that. It's just a movie that's so praised, you would think, had more unique ideas up its sleeve, is the thing. But, it's still executed in a good way, and that's what really matters. So that's really kind of the void point, but I felt like that needed to be said. I totally forgot to mention, obviously we bring in, Ralph Fiennes, who, Ralph Fiennes is talking to M, and they're talking about the fact that M needs a successor, and M is talking about who's going to be her successor with a guy named Mallory. I wonder where this is going to go. But Ralph Fiennes makes a kick-ass M, so I'm not complaining.
No, not at all.
So that's great. When I saw I was waiting for it the whole time. Like, as soon as Skyfall ended, I was like, when Spectre comes around, we're going to get the Ralph Fiennes as M credit. It's going to be awesome. And it was. I was not down. Little things make me happy about that.
Indeed.
And I do think it's ballsy that not only does M have a successor, she's fucking killed. I thought that was ballsy. And I like that they went that route, and it really added an emotional thing to it. And it really brought a darkness to it. So much so, I could be mistaken with the other Craig movies. I really don't remember much about them. But this might be the first Bond movie ever with an F-bomb in it. When they finally get to Skyfall and everything's down, and M realizes what the shitstorm that's coming down on them, and just a broken person now just says, I really fucked this up, didn't I? It's just a really real moment with her character. But yes, it's also, and it really sets us in, one of the best things is it sets us in for what we know and love. Like I said, we have a male M, we have Moneypenny at the desk. I know it seems misogynistic, it's the 60s, but now it's just they don't play it off that way in the movie, because Moneypenny's like a fucking badass action hero now. And even M actually gets in on the action in Spectre, so, he gets shot in this one, so... There's all that, but it really sets us in with the real classic Bond, and like I said, just the big moment that just made everybody freak out, where he pulled the cloth off, the cover off, and it was the Aston Martin from Goldfinger, and it plays the original theme as they drive to Skyfall. This was just definitely, this was the new Bond movie for the old Bond lovers, I think, and that's why I think I take to this. Like I said, I think this, I know people love Casino Royale, I know people fucking love Casino Royale to a disgusting degree.
Yes.
But Skyfall's the only Craig one so far that I really, really liked, and I think that's the fact that it really, and that's, I was really into the parts of Spectre that felt like the classic Bonds, and I'm glad they're going in that direction now, finally. So, that's having to choose. They're pretty much equal in my eyes, but for nostalgia purposes and the fact that I'm so traditional with this series, apparently I guess I would say Goldfinger, but they're about, the last 20 minutes or so of Skyfall are insanely great, though. Like, the last the ending of Skyfall, like, once they get to Skyfall and Silva invades and all that, that's some of the best Bond we've ever seen, for sure, that segment. But yeah, Goldfinger is pretty much where all the stuff we love started to come from. Like I said, even though I think the best of the entire series was the one before it, still, that's how I feel about this. So, yeah.
So ends another edition of Versus next week. Oh boy, I've been dreading this one for a while. We're going to get a little personal, and that's about as far as I'm going to say right now. So, look for that next week. And
he was supposed to participate, but I think he's backing out.
Yeah, probably. Because I'm terrible. If you've seen my Wayne's World retrospective, you know that I'm really not good at doing reviews on camera. So it's not that I'm bad. It's just I talk a lot, and I kind of talk over myself. So it's a lot easier to do it this way. And the week after, we're going to do a Versus that we've been wanting to do for a while that we finally have visual aids for. So that's going to be coming your way. And it's not going to be blood red.
This was a one-time thing, I promise.
Yeah.
This was just a oh shit last minute kind of thing.
Yeah, but they do look better than I had them on. I'm not gonna lie about that. So that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. Thank you for watching Pop, and thank you for checking out our Academy Awards predictions from yesterday and AJ's movie reviews, which we did review Spectre on Friday, along with the Peanuts movie, Dancing It's On, Rock the Casbah, and Truth. So that being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. And AJ, any parting words?
That's it.